Instagram thing. Okay. Yay. Well, hi.
Hello.
Welcome to Reading Between the Lines. I'm Sarah, and I'm joined by my brother, Ahren. You could say
I'm
hi.
Ahren. Hi.
Hello. And today we're going to talk about the theme of dimensions or parallel universes in books. And
I was going to wear like a hat and a scarf and sunglasses and then be like, oh, sorry, this is evil Ahren from the alternate universe.
Yes. I like that.
But I didn't have anything to, you know how like in Star Trek when they went to the evil multiverse, like everybody had a goatee and a dagger and a sash. You know, I should have done that.
I was just talking to Eva today about stereotypes, and I was trying to use villains as an example. And anyway, we decided this theme, I think, because I kept confusing it with time travel. And so you would be like, no, that's dimensions, but we can talk about that later, that too. So
I think we need to revisit time travel because there's a few that we really could have touched on, like Miss Peregrine's Home for Unusual Children, or that one.
Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely.
And technically, that's a time travel because. Yeah. And then if we do alternate universes again, you know, we really have to spend more time with the Philip Pullman books, his Dark Materials.
Yes, absolutely.
So, but anyway, I don't want to mention too much stuff and then get off topic.
Why don't you go ahead with your first book?
Oh, sure. Okay. So, one of the books that I read is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. So this was published in, I think, August of 2000 by Crown. I read this on my Kindle. I don't know about you, but I find that I read faster on the Kindle, and I think it's the font. Have you found that at all?
No, I haven't noticed that.
I think it would be ingenious of Amazon to design a font that's easier for speed reading, so you recognize the shapes of words better. And then that way you churn through books faster, and then you buy more books more often. I'm sure some psychologist for Amazon has thought of that.
You need to sell this idea.
Anyway, I'm sure they've thought of it. So the Space Between Worlds follows the story of Kara, but not the Kara you think. She was born on Earth 22 as Kara Lee, and hold on. But then Kara Menta came through the multiverse as a traveler, and she died because you can't have duplicates in the multiverse. So Kara Lee, who was the girl who lived in Earth 22's multiverse, she saw this as a way to escape her post-apocalyptic kind of gangland hellhole that she lived in, and then she traveled back to Earth 0, pretending to be Kara Menta, but everybody calls her Kara anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So she wasn't the original multiverse traveler. And then that's set up kind of like an astronaut program where you have to be trained in order to do it. And the people who do it are from Earth 0. The way this works, in this book, there are 380 Earths. There used to be 382, but we can't get to 2 of them anymore because they became too different. The multiverse technology is like getting into a transporter pod or kind of a sensory deprivation tank, or a cross with a Apollo lunar lander capsule. And then you kind of just bloop over to like whatever universe they send you to. The kicker is that you can't exist in the other multiverse. You have to be dead in the other one. Otherwise, if you go, the universe doesn't like having duplicate people, and one of them like turns and bends and crinkles and cracks up like they're being squished like a piece of paper. It's kind of gross. So, but
that's
anyway,
gross. Thank you.
Yeah, and so that's what happened to the original girl. She got crunkled up like inside of a tin can that got squished.
Yeah.
And then Earth 22 girl took her place over. So anyway, so oh yeah, and so according to the story, there's an infinite number of universes. They have this machine that can only send people to universes or multiverses that resonate with ours, so they're similar enough. So I guess we can't go to the dinosaur universe where, like, the dinosaurs still live because it's too weird. We have to have. In fact, I think she says Earths 1 through 18 are so similar, like you can't even tell. Like she goes to them just to make sure they're still the same, and then as they get progressively outward in numbers, the Earths get a little bit different. So, and then apparently we can't go to Earth 382 anymore because when they went there were threats of nuclear war in the newspapers, and then suddenly they weren't able to tune that one in anymore. So
it's gone.
Something
they wiped themselves
something
out.
got blowed up, and it was different enough that they couldn't go there anymore. So I've read this book once. It's like 322 pages, and I started reading it again. And right now I'm on page 122, and I think the book is way too long. With apologies to the author, I think there's just too many scenes. Like the author seems to have shoveled in more and more drama just to keep it going. It's kind of like I was describing to you earlier, the soap opera All
From
My
the 80s.
Children that our mom and all of our aunts used to like. And, they'd get into one story, I don't know what you call it, thread, I guess. And they drag it out for weeks, It's just kind of like, okay, Chandler needs to just, go to the ball or whatever. I don't know. And it's kind of like this book. I kind of wish she would have just, like, I'm on page 122, and I think, you know what, you could wrap this up in about 25 pages and I'd be happy. Like, we're done now. So, and I think you mentioned that you really liked this book a lot.
I also have read this book and I loved it. Yeah. And what did I like about it? I felt like the idea that our main character was interesting, or that she was useful or powerful, because in all the other dimensions she was dead. And so can you explain more about that?
Yeah, I liked that too. And I have a quote lined up on my Kindle. It's chapter 1 basically starts with her saying, "Even worthless things can become valuable once they become rare. This is the grand lesson of my life." So what she's found is that, her growing up in this sort of apocalyptic wasteland, Darwin hasn't been kind to her, and most of the multiverses she's died. She's not as successful, at keeping herself alive. But that's good for traveling to the multiverse, because now she's useful. She can go to
do research or whatever else.
There's only 8 where she's still alive. Yeah. And so it's weird that, like, she keeps getting bumped off or murdered, or, falls off a cliff, or something happens to her, and all of these other ones. So, I kind of talk about the world environment too here. I have my thing written up here. Just a second.
And I know that our author grew up in
Mojave Desert near Joshua Tree. Yeah. And so if I don't want to get onto a tangent, but we've talked about the movie Bad Batch. And that was sort of a desert wasteland. Like, if you're too bad, the I don't know, the judicial system will kick you out, no more citizenship, and you get sent to this Badlands, which is sort of like Texas, Mexico, kind of a dry desert.
Yeah.
And everybody is left to fend for themselves. And Jason Momoa is in it as kind of this, like, tattooed gang leader guy. Anyway.
Yeah, he's a super bad guy, right, in that one?
Super bad guy. And so to finish my tangent, they took all of these people who live in this place called Slab City, which I think is some kind of wasteland place where like homeless people just camp out. Sort of, I think it's near the Salton Sea, sort of
It is.
past
It's a
Palm
real
Desert.
place.
Yeah, it's a real place. And you said you saw the documentary,
I
and
did.
you were shocked that all of the wastelanders in this post-apocalyptic kind of weird, nothing's out there desert world, nobody was in costume. They got all of the people, or as much of them as they could, from Slab City, and just said, "Come on over and be an extra in our movie. Come as you are." And they looked really kind of wacky and disheveled and sunburnt and a little bit dirty, kind of like Burning Man after a week.
It's basically it's like a Burning Man city that is just
kind of. Yeah, and so
it's fascinating.
That's sort of like, and that's
There's
another
a theme
problem
of that in the book.
Yeah, that's where most of the book is set. The setting is this sort of Bad Batch kind of wasteland place, and I kind of wish that she would travel the multiverse more. I thought it would be like having a submarine, but instead of going around the ocean, you just go down and stay on the bottom and then come back up, but you haven't really gone anywhere.
No.
And so you've just done a down up, and so, but anyway.
One thing I wanted to mention was that there is some representation. There's like a slight side lesbian story. I mean, it's not overtly sexual, but
I think she's attracted to her handler, her mentor.
Yeah.
It would kind of be like if Luke had a thing for Obi-Wan.
But only if they it's a sort of enemies to something else.
A little bit.
I don't want to say lovers, but
yeah. I'll finish reading what I've written up here.
Okay.
So interesting. The author grew up in kind of the wasteland of the Mojave, like around Joshua Tree, I guess. And this book is set in what we can assume to be a post-apocalyptic world where the ozone is burned off all the plants, or so there's no plants. I don't know. It doesn't seem like much grows there. Or somehow we did something to ruin the climate, but we don't really, it's not really explained. On Earth Zero, where they discovered or invented this multiverse travel technology, the wealthy and privileged live inside a walled settlement called Wiley City. And the low-life peasants and peons live outside the walled city in a settlement called Ashtown, and something that resembles the Mojave Desert salt flats, like where they have Burning Man. So what I didn't like about this multiverse book, I think I said this, is that they only really go to the one, and it's the one multiverse where it's like everything's a Mad Max post-apocalypse gangland society.
It's very gangland.
Yeah. And so, Goodreads gives this 3.9 stars. I would give it like a 3. I think the concept was good. It went on too long, and I kind of wish they had gone to more places.
I want to look up on Goodreads real quick, like what I gave it. I'm really curious.
Okay.
The space between worlds.
I mean, it's also, it's good to, as an author, to write about what you know. And so she wrote about like her backyard, basically, from what it sounds like. But I can just see Jim Carrey pushing a shopping cart through a dump, and talking to crows. It's just that's setting the whole book for 322 pages, and it's kind of like, I kind of wish we'd change the scene up a little bit and go somewhere else.
I gave this 4 stars, and there was one more thing I wanted to mention about this book that I thought was interesting. Shoot, maybe it'll come back.
Okay. Do you want to talk about your next one? And come back to okay.
This is my all-time favorite book ever, and it is extremely difficult to explain the plot. But I think that's a theme for all of these books, honestly. And we'll talk about like Alice in Wonderland later. If you had to explain Alice in Wonderland to somebody else, like it's a different dimension, it's difficult.
It really is. I mean, the mechanics of how you get there, and when we were talking about the time travel plots, I think for one of them I had to look at a spreadsheet that showed where and when, like a roadmap, because I don't think our brains are really designed to cogitate anything that's not a linear arrow of time. And I think we have similar trouble cogitating multiverses sometimes.
I know I do. Okay, so this book is called The Peripheral, and it is by William Gibson. October 24th of 2014, this came out by Berkley. William Gibson is a Canadian author. He's I think, the father of cyberpunk. So basically, he tends to write, and since like the 80s, he's been writing about the distant future. And it's all of his books are like techno thrillers. They're very they lean into the digital age experience. We have touched on the book Idoru previously, where a Mick Jagger rock star falls in love with a hologram, and that's anyway.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you a question. So, like, I've read Snow Crash, and I think Count Zero or two of his books.
Yeah.
So are you equating cyberspace with a multiverse?
Usually his books do not cover a different dimension. This is the first book where he has delved into cyberpunk with a dose of parallel universes.
Okay, right.
So
the Snow Crash and the other, you go into virtual reality, but that's not really, you're still in your same universe, I guess. So,
now it's kind of the same thing with this book, The Peripheral, because our main character, I'll just go through the summary. Her name is Flynn Fisher. I'm going to guess she's like 21 or 22 years old. She lives in rural America. She lives in a trailer. Jobs are super scarce. So the America that she lives in is pretty destitute. And a lot of ways to make money would be like illegal drug manufacturing. She works at a 3D print shop. And I want to just mention that her dimension is considered in the past, but for us reading this book, this is about 50 years ahead.
Okay, so her technology is further on. It's kind of like Star Wars. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we've got spaceships and laser beams. Pew, pew.
Exactly. Okay. So she works at a 3D print shop, and her brother is a former Marine veteran. He has got some neurological damage because soldiers now have neurological implants to help them perform better. And anyway, he does virtual security. I'm not going to even explain that. You can just pretend to understand what that might mean. And he asks Flynn to take a job for him where she is also doing virtual security. Okay. So she does this virtual game. She thinks it's a game. And she witnesses a very graphic murder while she's playing this game. And she just is kind of, she rips her, VR headset off, and she's completely disturbed by this because it felt so real. And in fact, it was. Okay. And so there's also a character in a future dimension who is a publicist. And in fact, what she witnessed, this murder in this quote unquote game, was in this other dimension that is much more technically advanced further along.
Oh, wow. So her security job is to look at a multiverse and to look into another universe. So she's not looking.
She doesn't realize that.
Okay. So she's not doing security in her own universe. No. That's pretty
She's
fantastic.
Doing some sort of she basically in this game, and I know this is stick with me here. She's playing a virtual VR headset game where she is flying a drone, and she is making sure that a apartment building is secure. There are other drones, like paparazzi type of drones, that are flying into the airspace of this apartment, and it's her job to bat them away with her drone. Okay. And on the balcony of an apartment complex, she witnesses from her drone this murder. Okay. So in this other dimension that she realizes is not a game, there is a publicist, and he's kind of in charge of cleaning up this horrific thing that happened, meaning how to spin it. Long story short, how do we get to this dimensional part here is, while these two characters begin to interact with one another and help each other out to figure out this mystery of who committed the murder. They cannot physically visit each other's dimension. However, Flynn can visit the publicists, seemingly to her a future, but it's an alternative dimension, by being a host for a organic robot. So she can then move around inside this like mannequin, basically, that's designed by Hermé. And, it's fascinating. So long story short, this is a really interesting book. There's a lot of politics in it that are kind of similar to politics happening for us right now. William Gibson is always really, really good at being able to predict trends and happenings well in advance that really do come to fruition. Sure. And he is able, so this publicist is able to help Flynn to also change the technology and change the course of her dimension so that it is avoiding the huge apocalypse that happened to their dimension.
Okay.
So there you go. I gave it 5 stars because that is ridiculous and complicated and fantastic.
It's kind of funny you mentioned the robot by Hermé. I'm working on a story that's sort of a I don't know, a robot story, and the robot that Stella is the name of the robot, and she decides for herself that her favorite color is this sort of London blue, and so it's a little bit like Daft Punk. They have like the faceplate. So for her faceplate, she gets a Lalique glass lens, I guess.
Yeah.
For her faceplate.
So yeah.
In her favorite color.
I think that's fascinating. So William Gibson is also very like always brand focused, meaning he's very interested in like how businesses and corporations are marketing themselves in the future, which that's my background. And so of course for me, that's fascinating. So yeah.
Okay. Very good. The next one I would like to talk about is really one of my favorites. It's The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman.
Beautiful cover.
Yeah, it's nice. I read them all on Kindle, but I wanted to have a copy of this one. So that was published. There's 8 in the series. It published December 2014 in the UK by Tor. Tor, like they've been doing.
I love Tor.
Yeah,
Tor's my favorite.
Yeah. And I wrote in my notes here, I loved these because at the time I was looking for steampunk novels, and this one really fit the bill. Also, the author came out with a new book every December, and I would buy it on my Kindle and start reading it on the airplane when I flew out to California for Christmas.
Very
so
nice.
That was kind of my treat. The protagonist, Irene, is like a lady Doctor Who, but her TARDIS isn't a blue police box. She can open a magical door through the multiverse by being inside any library. There just needs to be a sufficient collection of books present for her magic to open the door and go through. So she gets power by words and by books.
That is so cool. That is very cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And so the mechanism here for multiverse travel is a kind of magic called the language. And so she can use the language to manipulate reality. However, doing so takes a lot of energy. So she can do something like, okay, make the mud in your backyard turn to quicksand. So all the bad guys who are standing in your backyard suddenly sink a foot. And then she can say, okay, quicksand, dry out. And everybody's like, feet are stuck in the lawn. So, it's a little bit, I've never really seen Stranger Things, the TV show, but I think there's a character called 11. And every time she uses her telekinetic powers, she gets a headache and a nosebleed.
Yes, she does.
So
yes.
Irene kind of does that. It really punches her in the gut if she does anything that's like too physics altering, So she can say like, okay, all of the doors and windows in the house shut and lock. and like that's like a magic spell that she says it in the language, and the language affects like the reality. So anyway, the protagonist, Irene, she works for an organization called the Library, which is in its own multiverse, and they exist to keep the balance between order and chaos. The multiverses have different levels of order and chaos. We would be said to live in a high order world where we have physics and technology that dictate how things work. A high chaos world would be the one like The Hobbit or Dungeons and Dragons, where people can cast spells and there's elves, so high fantasy. There's two different races too that kind of control these different types of multiverses. The dragons are a kind of monarchy that control the high order worlds, and they fight with the fae, like the elves, I guess, who control the high chaos worlds. And each group tries to take over multiverses for their own, and the library tries to keep the peace and the balance. And the protagonist's job, she's a little bit like a James Bond character. So she's given missions, and basically has a license to kill too. Her missions are that she must go to a multiverse and collect a certain book. Now, here's the kicker. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's quite a challenge, depending on how rare the book is. I mean, it could be a book that's at every Barnes and Noble, or it could be a book that is the only transcript known is in, Putin's dungeon under the Kremlin or something. So infiltrating the place where the book is kept, she has to get the book no matter what. And what the library does is they collect groups of the same book. One example would be, so in our universe, spoiler alert, in Romeo and Juliet, everybody dies at the end. Okay, so sad. No. Oh, so I just ruined it for you. I had no idea. So, like, say for example, in 99 multiverses, Shakespeare wrote it that way, where both Romeo and Juliet die at the end. She goes to the one multiverse where he wrote it with a happy ending, and Romeo and Juliet live happily ever after. And she goes and she'll collect that version of the book and bring it back to the library. And the library kind of exists by having books from different multiverses as kind of a way to link itself with those multiverses and to keep balance. So there's a little magic woo in there too, with why they need books from multiverses.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a little bit like, now I've taken a book from this multiverse, so there's a thread tying it to the library, and we can go there now. It's easier to go there. Yeah, I thought that just blew my mind when I kind of felt that concept. It's like, think of a book that you hated the ending. Well, maybe it ended the other way,
God,
in some other universe, the author made a different choice. Yeah. So I liked this series very much. There are 8 books in total. I was kind of hoping for a 9th book, but I can see that the author kind of got tired of the series and wanted to move on. You just kind of tell with it.
Are these novellas? Or are they regular full-size novels?
No, they're full-size novels. The first one, it's like 326 pages or something like that. Yeah. I mean, so they're good. They're not novellas at all. They're big books. I think she started out great, and there was a lot of intrigue with the monarchy of the dragons, and it was sort of enemies to friends kind of a thing, with the main fae, who was at first her enemy and then now helps her, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. There's a bigger problem, and so she needs the fae guy to help her out.
Is he a reoccurring character in the other books too?
Yeah, he is. Cool. He is. And so in the first book he's like the bad guy, but in the next books he becomes more of her friend a little bit.
Nice.
It's cool. But unfortunately, I think by the 7th book out of 8, the story it moved along, and then it plotted, and it moved again, and then it plotted, and it was almost like you could tell the author's mood that week when she was writing it. And so I had no offense to Genevieve Cogman. I liked her books very much. But then by the 8th book, which is the final one, it felt like she was just trying to wrap it all up. Like, okay, I'm going to be done with this. And then after the 8th book, she stopped writing about the Invisible Library altogether. And her next book was like a historical fiction about the French Revolution, which I haven't picked up yet. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's fine. I think eight books is a long way to go with any kind of thing, so she kept it up great. And I liked the way that this series was wrapped up. It didn't feel like it was
just left
cobbled or anything. Yeah, I mean, I thought went into it, and she did it in a good way. So I mean, it's satisfying. It didn't
tell me. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think with the TV series of Game of Thrones, everybody didn't like the ending. It felt like, what have you done? Like, they just want producer said, okay, we got to pull the plug here.
We're out of funding.
Yeah, we're out of funding. Right. And so the Invisible Library series did not feel like that. It felt like, okay, I can see now she's answered a lot of questions that the other books, led up to. And so I was satisfied with the way the 8th book ended, but I could tell.
Would this be considered like YA, or would it be considered?
Yeah, I think so.
Young adult.
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, because her boyfriend lover is a guy named Kai, and he's a blue water dragon. The water dragons all of the dragons can shapeshift. So if they want to be human, they can. But like if he gets mad, it's almost like the scene in the Terminator where the liquid metal man gets a glitch, and you can see like metal go woomph through his body. So once in a while, like his blue scales will come out and his eyes will turn dragon eyes, and then his teeth will be like sharp teeth, and then he'll be like, excuse me, and then he'll make himself like, okay, I'm human again. Sorry. Yeah. And he's sent by the dragon monarchy to observe the library to make sure that the library doesn't get out of hand, and he's supposed to watch Irene, but
because libraries are so dangerous.
Yeah, but he's like a handsome Japanese looking I don't know, like a wealthy Japanese businessman kind of person, but young, and they fall in love, and anyway, it's cool. There's a bit of that, and so she's got a lot of stuff going on. There's a little bit of romance, and I guess it's kind of YA a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know,
cool.
But anyway,
how many stars did you give it? The first book?
Oh gosh, I'd give the Invisible Library 5 stars. Every single book except for 7 and 8, I'd probably give them 4 stars.
Okay. All right.
But I really enjoyed the series. I thought it was a fantastic
I might want to read
genre,
that.
the way that she just put her multiverse together. I thought that was really imaginative.
I'm really fascinated by asking and talking to authors about how they do world building. I'm not going to talk about that for too long, but I think that's really fun. So I did have an interview that I did with my friend Krista, who we talked about world building a little bit. So, okay. So Ahren talked about a fantasy themed dimensional book. My first one was like a techno thriller. So this next one is also fantasy. And so what I want to illustrate, and we're also going to have an honorable mention thing here at the very end where we list out our other favorite books. But I just want to, my point being is that this is not just like fantasy or sci-fi. You can find this theme throughout all different types of fiction. But here's one that's fantasy. So this is it's fairly new. This is the Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. This is by Brandon Sanderson, who I lovingly call Brandy Sandy. This was published April 11th of 2023 by Dragonsteel Entertainment, which is his publishing company. I listened to the audio book, and this was narrated by Michael Kramer and Kate Reading. So here's the summary. A man awakens in a clearing in what appears to be medieval England with no memory of who he is, where he came from, or even why he's there. He is chased by a group from his own timeline. His sole hope for survival lies in regaining his missing memories. He makes allies among the locals and perhaps even trusting in their superstitious boasts. His only help is from the real world should have been a guidebook entitled The Frugal Wizard's Handbooks for Surviving Medieval England, except that his copy exploded during transport to this dimension. The few fragments he has managed to save from his book provide clues to his situation, but he can't figure them out at all. So Brandon Sanderson is really wonderful at creating characters that you love because of their realness, their authenticity. So but he does write very high fantasy. And for me, that's a little bit hard because there's a lot of world building. There's a magic system. There are a lot of characters, and that's too much for my small brain to handle. However, this one has not as many characters
that other people have had about different books. If there's too many characters to follow, it's hard. It's not.
It becomes an opera, whether it's a space opera or a Western opera.
Yeah,
it's too much.
Yeah. I've read books like that. I think one of the Isaac Asimov Foundation series books was like that. I'm like, who are all these people?
Now, one thing I wanted to mention was, because you had said this the other day, like Kurt, can you tell me that quote you had about Kurt Vaughn and every character has a need? Or
Yeah. So I'm attending this writing group, and I like to spout quotes from famous authors about writing from their own writing classes. And one of the quotes that I used recently was Kurt Vonnegut. I think he's actually got a video on YouTube where he says this, and he's talking about story structure and how to write.
Mm-hmm.
And he says every character should want something, whether it's just a glass of water. Like, I don't know if I said
what
that
it's driving them.
clearly enough. Yeah, every character should want something, and it doesn't matter what they want. Even if it's a glass of water, they should have a want, and that want then drives their behavior, and then characters' behavior creates plot.
So I love that, because that really struck with me, because that's helping me to understand why I like Brandy Sandy so much, because of the way he writes his characters. I also highly recommend his book Tress, which is more of a YA novel. But anyway, that one has pirates in it. This book is really funny, and it's more of a humorous sort of a satire. And that's not usually a typical type of genre that I read, but I loved this. And
may I interject something really quick? I don't know if you were too young to have seen, it was a TV show in the 80s called The Greatest American Hero.
I did not.
Okay, and the premise with that, very briefly, is that a guy is given a magic spacesuit by aliens, and the spacesuit will give him, it's sort of like Mork from Ork's red suit.
Yeah.
Okay, and if he puts this suit on, he can do things. He can fly, or he can, levitate objects. And the aliens give him an instruction manual, and then they fly off. But when they fly off, it creates like a big wind, and it blows the instruction manual away. So he doesn't know how to use the suit. He's got an amazing space, super suit, but he doesn't have the instruction manual anymore. So he has to figure out the super suit, which sounds like a trope, like what you're talking about, where he knows he's a wizard, but he lost the wizard instruction manual to cast all the spells. So he has to figure that out. How do I do this?
That's funny. Kate mentioned that she remembers that show. I was going to type this comment in, but I'll just say we were also talking about Quantum Leap, because that's a dimensional show. Back from that was in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't know.
Is it a dimensional show? I would say that's a time travel show.
Is it?
Yeah.
I thought he was going to different universes.
No, there's another one with a group of 5 people, and they lose their own universe, and then they have to get back to it. That's a different one. I think Jonathan Rhys-Davies was in it. Something like that. That's a different TV show. This Quantum Leap show was, they're always going to our multiverse, but at different times. So actually, once he goes back in time, and he's himself as a 14-year-old, and he meets his sister, and then she has a guitar, and normally he didn't know how to play guitar when he was 14, and then he picks it up, and then he starts playing Imagine by John Lennon, and she's like totally freaked out, because like, how did you learn how to play the guitar, and how did you come up with such a beautiful song? So, and so he's back in like 1964 talking to his sister.
Yeah.
But he's got knowledge from further
See,
future.
that's what I'm saying. I'm always like time travel and dimensions. It's like, it's very confusing. Anyway, so the Frugal Wizard's Guide to, what is this book called? The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England.
Right, but he's lost the handbook.
He lost the handbook. So here he is in medieval England. He is not from that type of era. He's from a very advanced futuristic dimension. And he has to come to terms with how to gain back his memory, but he also realizes that he is augmented. So that's how he figures out that he's not from this kind of time period. He is augmented. Why is he augmented? And this is not a spoiler, but he figures out that he doesn't actually need to eat. And so, but that's weird. Like, how do you cover that up when you're traveling with a group of people? So he takes on this idea of becoming a magical type of creature. I'm not going to say what kind, but this is in the Middle Ages. And so he's able to convince everyone else around him that he has these magic powers and that he's not human. It would be like taking out our phone in the Middle Ages and like showing them a video, it would blow their little minds. So
magic box. What is this with deviltry? Yeah.
Right.
Burn him at the stake.
Yeah. So I gave this 5 stars because it's really impeccable writing. It's really fun. I enjoyed it a whole bunch. And I think this would be great for anyone who has, more of like that, enjoys like British comedy or British, those TV.
I wonder if the author is a big fan of Monty Python's Holy Grail.
There's a little Monty Python in here. And just to be clear, Brandy Sandy is he's American, I believe. But yeah, I mean, so anyway, that was my second book.
Okay. No, that's good. I want to read your William Gibson book, and I want to read that one too now.
Okay.
So, okay, let me check out my notes. The next book I'd like to talk about is Rabbits by Terry Miles.
Yeah. So good.
I listened to this book on Audible, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. It made like I wanted to get on the bus and go to work every morning because that meant I could spend 45 minutes with listening to this book.
Yes.
And I want to congratulate or comment the book is read by Christine Lakin, Lakin. And she does a fantastic job at narrating the book. And I think that helped a lot. If you get an audiobook and you really resonate with the person who's reading the book to you, like I think all the Harry Potter books are read by the wonderful Stephen Fry, who's got such a dynamic voice. Yeah, I mean, that makes it or breaks it if the person is good or not so good.
It really does.
As an aside,
I've stopped listening to books because I didn't jive with the narrator's funky voice.
I think there's like 12 books in some Witch and Wizardry series that I was going through, and I devoured the first 8 out of the 12, and then that person didn't do the next audiobook, the 9th through the 12th, and then she pronounced all of the characters' names wrong, and it was just so cringy. It's just like, no, it's Leviosa, not Leviosa. You're saying it wrong. So
Kate's saying she likes Jim Dale's Harry Potter.
Okay.
So as a narrator.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, if there's a good narrator, then that really makes it. Okay. Notes. Let's see what I got. Rabbits was a lot of fun. It's a weird kind of a multiverse where nobody really explains the mechanism. And that's the part of the mystery
of how you okay.
Yeah, and another thing why I wanted to get on the bus every morning and listen to this audiobook was because of the hook. The author is Terry Miles. And oh gosh, I forgot to write down when this came out. Was it 2020 recently?
I'll look it up. Hang on. You keep
talking,
thanks. I'll look it up.
But the way the author like dangles a carrot, he hooks you by giving you some information, but not enough. And it makes you, it's the magic trick that makes something a page turner that you can't put down.
Yes, exactly. This was published on
He's
June
good at
8th.
that.
So 2021 in June. This was published.
2021. Okay. So I don't know the way to explain this. I'm going to just read a couple quotes. Okay. So Rabbits seems to be a game that's based on finding connections between things. And some people think that's like the road to schizophrenia. You're just making stuff up and seeing things where they aren't. You're making up serendipity. And so some people are like, if you play Rabbits, you're just a bloody weirdo. But other people who play Rabbits think it's like for real. So from chapter 1, let me read my quote here. The following was allegedly written on the wall in a laundromat in Seattle in 1959 under the hand-scrawled title Manifesto and above a hand-stamped graphic of a rabbit. You play, you never tell. Find the doors, portals, points, and wells. The wardens watch and guard us well. You play and pray, you never tell. And so at the opening of chapter 2, it's kind of weird. You never figure out who the main character's real name is. The narrator just says, in case you're wondering, my name is K. That's it. Just K. One letter. 2 things I'll tell you. First, K is short for something. And second, I'll never tell you what that something is. You'll just have to find a way to cope with that disappointment. And then he also says in the beginning of chapter 1, they talk about there's a local movie theater playing the movie Donnie Darko, which I think is about an alternate universe. And then the protagonist says, the Venn diagram of people interested in rabbits and in Richard Kelly's sci-fi thriller from 2001 is essentially just a circle. So if you like this one thing, you're going to want to play Rabbits. So I don't know how well I've described what Rabbits is, and the book doesn't really either. It's kind of like a Dan Brown kind of mystery, trying to figure it out, and so that's the fun part of the book. So the book has been described as something people would really like if they've read Ready Player One, because it has a ton of 80s pop culture references. And I think at the beginning, first chapter, they're playing like Robotron or some, video game that I used to put quarters in when I was a kid.
There's an arcade game that they love to play. Like there's kind of a meeting room where other local rabbit
and it's like, I don't know, I can't remember if there's a clue in, like, if you win the game and you see the credits, there's a clue, something like that.
There's other people who have won the game in the past, and you can see like the original person who has won. Their high score initials are at the end of that game.
And I think what happens is people who win the game now in our timeline, somebody has discovered, like, back scrawled in an ancient Egyptian temple built 4,500 years ago, that guy's name, along with a list of all of the other names of people who won. So it's like, how is that possible? So, and then they say the only people who call it Rabbits are the people who play it, but they don't know that that's the official name. That's just kind of based on what first scrawled manifesto was when they first sort of discovered it. And they don't know how many times it's been played before. They think this is the 8th game, kind of like, okay, this is the 25th Olympics or whatever. So they think this is they think the new game has just started. And
they're basically essentially competing against each other.
And they're competing to try to
each time.
Right, and they're trying to find the next clue and the next clue, and they're trying to get the next clue faster than other people to get to the end. But where's the end? Nobody knows what the finish line is. The book is the story of a conspiracy theory, and the protagonists search to discover more about it. They know they're getting closer to the truth when members of their group start dying. It would be like a dark episode of Scooby-Doo where Fred and Velma die and Shaggy has lost Scooby, and then he's the only one left, but he's found the secret gate off of the animation cell and into the Hanna-Barbera studio. It's that kind of a, what is happening here?
Bending.
So I don't know. Is that a dumb description? I don't know. But the book sure is fun. The author does a great job of creating suspense and leading the reader on so that they want to keep reading to find out more. So there's a lot of carrot dangling in this story, but
literally,
he reveals just enough and just enough. So by the end, I still feel that I hadn't really gotten the carrot, but I enjoyed the story all the same.
Yeah,
The
same.
mechanism by the mechanism by which the main character travels from universe to universe seems unknown. He just sort of does it.
Yeah.
He finds
Yeah.
himself in a version of like Seattle where his favorite restaurant that closed a few years ago is now still open and he can go back there again.
And he's like,
Um,
yes.
yeah, and his friends are still there, but they don't seem to
Yeah.
remember the same yesterday that he does.
Yeah. It would be like
And
Kate. It would be like if Miyake's was still open, but it's a different
yeah,
dimension.
so without spoiling too much, the book had a feeling of the movie Doctor No's Secret Lair. Doctor No, James Bond. It's
Mhm.
sort of like, okay, is there a secret lair? Is there a secret organization that's like making this happen, or some kind of a CIA thing behind it all, but not? Or is this like a weird secret black project
Cats.
of
Yeah.
Google?
Yeah.
Who's doing this? Yeah. So anyway, Rabbits seems to be a game where people travel from multiverse to multiverse by following these clues and solving puzzles. It's almost like a CIA experiment, giving harder and harder encryption puzzles until somebody finally makes it all the way to headquarters in Alexandria, and then they're given a job offer. Congratulations, you passed the extremely difficult interview
You're one of
process.
us. Yeah.
You're one of us now. Yeah. Something like that. So anyway, I'm looking forward to reading the second
Yeah,
Rabbits
there's a
novel.
sequel.
You've given that to me, and I just started the first chapter.
I remembered the thing that I forgot. I wanted to, speaking of sequels,
Oh,
the
sure.
Space Between Worlds, which was the first book that you talked about. There's a sequel coming out for that as well.
Okay.
Any day now.
Any day now, right? And then you have a third book, I believe.
I do. So this one is going to be a bit more mainstream. This is also considered a thriller. This was not an audiobook, but a book of the month hardback that I got in. This was published in 2016 by Ballantine Books. So Dark Matter is by Blake Crouch. And there is currently a TV show streaming on Apple TV that has a whole bunch of great actors in it, including Jennifer Connelly. So here's the premise. Jason Desson is walking home through the chilly Chicago streets, excited for a cozy night at home with his wife Daniela and their son Charlie, when everything changes. A masked abductor asks, "Are you happy with your life?" and before knocking him out. So Jason wakes up strapped to a gurney. He's surrounded by strangers in hazmat suits. A man he doesn't recognize welcomes him back. His wife isn't his wife anymore. His son never existed. He is a celebrated genius and not just a college physics professor. So he has, in this dimension that he is now in, he has much more credibility and accolades to his name, but his family is gone. Is this new world the dream, or is it the reality that he remembers? Jason must navigate a bizarre and terrifying journey to find his way back to his family, confronting dark parts of himself and facing an unbeatable foe along the way. So, unlike The Space Between Worlds, which we talked about with your first book, where you cannot maintain space in the same dimension as the you there, otherwise one of you, well, you probably visiting will crumple and die. This one, you can interact with yourself in different dimensions, and that comes into play here quite a bit. This one has multi-dimensions and highlights the main character interacting with a version of himself in many ways, which is fascinating. And as some dimensional travel books are going to blow up the universe and the space-time continuum if you interact with yourself, that is not the case here. And I think that makes this book really unique and kind of gripping. So I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it like 4 or 5 stars. Now, Blake Crouch is not for everybody. Aaron's not really a fan of Blake Crouch.
Unfortunately, I didn't jive with the author's voice. I didn't really like the sentence structure. Something rubbed me the wrong way, and I was like, "Why would you write it that way? Why would you? Why would you make that sentence that way? Why? It's like I didn't get it.
It was hard to get behind.
I didn't want to follow it. It was kind of like you've ever taken a class with a teacher you didn't really like,
Sure,
and then
all the time.
if you drop out and then get into the other class with the other teacher, you
Makes a world of
love it. It
difference.
makes, and it's better. You just kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, now I really like calculus, just it felt like that. And no offense to the author. I just I couldn't get into it.
I get it. I have read other Blake Crouch books, and I'm not really a fan of them. This was I think he's got more than 3, but I've only read 3 of his books, and this is the only one that I cared for. Because I find there are times where his writing gets, for me, it just gets a little dry. Like,
Maybe
why is
that's
this
there.
necessary? Why do we need to know all this
Why are we
extra
dragging?
detail?
Like,
Like,
I
let's
wanted.
go.
I think what I wanted was a Dean Koontz novel where, something's moving, Odd Thomas has got a problem and he needs to solve, and action is happening.
So with that, I wanted to transition to talking to you a little bit about honorable mentions for
Sure.
books that we love that feature parallel universes or dimensions.
Yeah. So the one that I was like, oh, why didn't I just do that? It was, Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So, and one of the things I was thinking about, and you also mentioned this the other day, and I was like, oh yeah. So it is and it isn't a multiverse book because technically she wakes up at the end. And then you said, oh yeah, that's
Wizard
the
of
same
Oz.
thing with Wizard of Oz. Dorothy
Yeah.
wakes up and goes, oh, and you were there, and you were there, and you were the Tin Man. So, but you want it to be real. You think in your imagination, Wonderland is a real place. So I that's why I was like honorable mention, because I don't know if you could technically say that Alice in Wonderland is a multiverse book, although it's so popular and wonderful that the term falling down a rabbit hole has come into existence. One of the things that I wanted to mention was that stories that end with "and she woke up and it never really happened."
I hate that.
It's done well very rarely. And I really would like authors to just go, okay, if you can't do it better than Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz, don't do this trope. It's a dangerous trope to work with. And if you do it wrong, or especially in a TV show, the audience will get so mad at you for writing it that way. It's like, what? And I think people were really troubled by what's the movie where the Inception, where he spins the top at the end and you're not sure if he's still in dreamland or not. People got really frustrated with that. So I think if you're going to do a story that's you go and have this adventure and then you wake up at the end and it never really happened, you don't do that. You can only do it once in 1865 and then in 18 or 19, I don't know, 14 or 18, whenever Frank L. Baum wrote it.
I was just thinking this. Okay, so Kate in the chat, she just put like the ending of Lost. I was just going to say the exact same thing. So J.J. Abrams writing Lost, they just kind of had to end the TV show, and it was like, oh, it's all a dream. Like, no, after 4 years of this, no, it's not a dream. This is real.
Twin Peaks kind of wrapped up that way too.
I don't know. I never saw that, but possibly.
I didn't watch Lost, but for 5 years it was on. People were always debating and arguing about where are they? Are they in limbo? What's real? What's not? Kind of a thing.
Anyway, did you want to say more about Alice?
Oh gosh, no. I'll let you talk about. You've got a few, I think. So
I was just going to list off some others that came to mind just to show like that we may not. These are beloved, but you may not have considered or realized that they're dimensional. Never-ending Story. I feel like.
Yeah.
I didn't read that technically, though. I just watched the movie, but it is a book. Now, Midnight Library by Matt Haig. That is definitely like it's more literature. This is about like visiting other dimensions where you made different choices. I did not like that. I did not like this book, but many people loved it. And there's nothing fantastical about it. It was just you kind of wake up in the body of yourself in a different dimension. Now you mentioned The Golden Compass, which is a children's
the Philip
series.
Pullman books. There's 3 of them. There's The Golden Compass, there's The Subtle Knife, and then I believe the third one is The Amber Spyglass.
Yes.
Yeah. Those were good. And I was like, oh gosh, I love those. I ate those 3 books up in like 3 days. I loved them so much. Why didn't I talk about that? So maybe if we do this topic again, we can bring up those subjects.
I think so. We'll definitely have to do this one again. Now, for the historical fiction / romance lovers out there, we've got Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I'm not saying her name right. Now, Ursula K. Le Guin. Am I saying her name right, Aaron? Okay. She did The Lathe of Heaven, and that's dimensional, but definitely more like hard-boiled fantasy, I would say.
She's popularly known for The Wizard of Earthsea, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
I haven't read that or the one that you just mentioned, but she's apparently like really a well-loved author.
She is. My stepson Nathan, she is her favorite. She is his favorite author. Now, lastly, Stephen King wrote The Talisman, which is a dimensional travel kind of book.
Is that a modern one, like not a 70s novel?
I don't know, because I've never read a Stephen King book. It's on my. This might be the one that I read. No.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's fantastic.
Let me look this one up. It takes place in 1984. It's a fantasy.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons why I think Stephen King's writing is so good is he was an English teacher, like at a university. And I think in one of his books, I think he has a book called On Writing, which is, how to write stories. And he says, look, you know what? You have to love the English language. You really have to love writing and the structure. He says, what I write isn't considered, classic literature, but people buy it and they think it's fun. So, but I think he knows how to write, and that's very important to any author who might have a story. It just because your story is the greatest story ever, if you can't get it out on the page properly or well, it's going to really be a stumbling block.
Lastly, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So the Chronicles of Narnia.
Or C.S. Lewis, yes. Very good.
And what I like talking about as well, and I'll just mention this briefly, is like you said, the mechanism of how you get to the different dimensions. For Alice, she fell down a rabbit hole, or you walk through a wardrobe, or in the case of The Space Between Worlds, it was a deprivation chamber.
Yeah, it's some kind of it gets you're sealed in this dark capsule, and then they kind of like Star Trek transporter you to another place. But yeah, so the mechanics are different for every author, I think.
Ruby
some
slippers.
of them are very sci-fi, and some of them are like the Invisible Library. She just casts a spell, and put on, you're there.
So, and then I don't remember how it works for Outlander because I haven't read those, but anyway. Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show Rick and Morty.
A little bit. That's kind of a spoof on Back to the Future.
Back to the Future, yeah, because it started from a cartoon that was called, I think, Rick and Marty, and like Marty McFly, and people liked it, and so they Justin Roiland, I think, made it into it got picked up, and then he was able to do it. And so Rick Sanchez, which is kind of like Doc, he's got a portal gun, and he just zaps a green kind of hole appears, and then they can walk through to some other multiverse.
There was also a TV show that was British called Primeval. That was kind of about wormholes that would open up through different dimensions, and dinosaurs would come through, and they were all archaeologists and paleontologists, and they were trying to put the dinosaurs back. No, you cannot be here by Harrods. We need you to go back to your era.
I think the TV show that we were talking about earlier that you might have been a little bit confused with, I just looked it up. It's called Sliders. It was featured from 1995 to 2000, and they have a portal gun where they go to an alternate universe, and then they break the portal gun, and so they don't remember which universe they came from and how to get back. So they just keep using the remote control clicker to next, and hope that it's a circle and they'll get back to where they came from.
Yes, because that had John Rhys Davies from Indiana Jones, and then Jerry O'Connell was in that.
Yeah. the write-up on IMDb says a boy genius and his comrades travel to different parallel universes trying to find their way back home. But yeah, so
yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. That was a good show. All right.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
What are we talking about next time? I don't know that we've decided, unless we think we have.
Gosh.
What do you
No, we were going to do books that mention the devil, but my
Yes.
favorite ones are where the devil's misunderstood. Oh no, he's not really such a bad guy. Kind of like the concept of the TV show Lucifer.
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
he's just this guy who has this job that's really crappy. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to do that or we'll have to think about it. I remember we were also going to do books that we wanted to throw at the wall.
Yeah, that might be easier and more approachable in the interim because we can all think of a long list of books like that. And so
yeah, talking about things you didn't resonate with, or the ending was like, what? Yeah. So I've got a few of those. I remember one of them was a book about a kid who got abducted by a UFO when he was 8, but he doesn't really have a good memory of it. And he's trying to piece back together what happened to him and interview the other people who also got abducted and don't really remember. And then by the middle of the book,
he just like gives up.
He's not 8 anymore. He's 18 and he's in college. And then he's like, you know what? This is too confusing. I don't care anymore. And as a reader, I'm like, well, if the protagonist doesn't care, I don't care either.
Why do I care? Exactly.
Why do I care? Right. And so I don't think that book was very well written. And I think that was one that I almost threw at the wall. But
yeah.
Not literally,
all right.
but wanted to.
Well, so we're going to wrap this up. Thanks for joining me. Kate says she misses us. We miss you. And this was really fun. So next time we'll talk about books about books or more dimensions or
that was the other one, books about books. Yeah, well,
books and hotels.
Books about hotels. And that's why we talked about The Shining, because that's a good book about a hotel. Well, maybe we'll do books about hotels. Oh gosh, there's so many choices. We'll have to decide.
All right, well, thanks, Ahren, and I will
Thank you.
we'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.
Okay.